News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line, and Nick Barris with you on a Wednesday. And as always, a good show on tap. We're going to talk about something that really affects us all, not just here in the metropolitan Nashville area, but the state as a whole, because let's face it, Nashville is a gem, all right? People come to this region from all around the state, frankly, all around the world, because it's such a wonderful city. And have you noticed we got a traffic problem? Have you noticed? Yeah, we have a traffic problem. So, by now, of course, most of you must be aware of the fact that the mayor has a $9 billion or so mass transit plan that's in, what should we call it, negotiations, in the works. Where does it go? There are supporters and there are some opponents of that. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to do a couple of shows. First, today, we're going to be talking with those who are in favor of this idea of the mass transit plan and go into why they think it's such a good idea. We'll take your phone calls as well. Now, just so you know, we are going to have another program here in about a week with opponents of the plan, and we'll let them have their say as well. We just figured we'd give each group an entire program to get into it, so it really gives you a comprehensive look at it and your chance to call and ask them questions however you happen to feel about it. So we'll get the phone number up there in a moment. The lines will be open, but with us this morning, two people. They're both from Transit for Nashville, Charles Robert Bone and Brenda Wynn. Good morning to you both.
Morning. Good morning.
Thank you. Was I right? Where do we stand on the plan anyway? When I say negotiate, obviously, you know, there are opponents, there are supporters. Just for the viewers out there, where do we stand on this plan right now?
So the plan has been approved by the Metro Council to put it on the ballot. So it's on the ballot as of May 1. Early voting will start in April, so it's here. So
the bottom line is, you're going to decide. The voters out there.
It's in the hands of the citizens.
It's going to be a referendum. I'm trying to remember the last time there was a big referendum that got a lot of people's attention on something. Frankly, I know there have been others since. Maybe you can, but I keep thinking about the Titans yes or no vote.
Yep. The Titans yes or no vote.
That's the one I think. That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, but look at how far we've come since that time, and look at how much economic impact the Titans have had on this community.
Oh.
Well, transit is very similar to that.
It is similar. I mean, I think you had 4 major referendums.
Okay.
1962, you had the referendum to be consolidated government, to combine the city and the county, which in and of itself was a huge step forward with the city.
Yeah, that's right.
1996 was the we didn't know who the Titans were at the time. It was the Oilers.
The Oilers.
But it was more than about, are you going to bring football, professional football to Nashville? It was, are we going to be an NFL city? And then in 2009, you had the English-only referendum, which was thankfully defeated. But was, are we going to be a welcoming city? And I think this lines up pretty nicely with those 3 referendums, which is, as a city, are we going to take the next step forward?
Okay. Let's move into this, and like I said, we're going to get your phone calls, questions, comments, criticisms, agreements, but before we get into all the reasons you think this is an important thing to do, and a welcoming city I think is part of it, because you come here, you get stuck in gridlock, it's awful, can't find a parking place, but what would each of you say, and I know you don't agree with it, are the strongest arguments right now against this by the opposition, in your mind? And I'm not asking you to make their argument for them, but when you hear it, and if you want to shoot it down, but what do you think the strongest arguments from the opponents of the plan are?
Increases in the sales tax is one of
People are going to have to pay a little more money in the short term.
And let me just say that it would cost me, the average purchaser in Nashville, about $5 a month more in sales tax.
Okay.
That $5 would go toward providing free public transportation for people who fell below the poverty line. Now, as a person who supports lifting my brothers and sisters, would I be willing to do that? Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I have been blessed. I grew up in public housing, but God has blessed me to serve in a capacity where I make a good living, and I want to give back. And I just view that as a way to give back, to help lift others.
Okay, so one part of that, and I think you'd probably agree, Charles, it's, you know, the money. They don't want to spend all this money right now, whatever the reason. Now, is there another reason? Is it that they don't like the idea of light rail? What's your thinking?
Well, I mean, I think the other thing you hear constantly is, well, technology is going to evolve and that we're going to see autonomous cars in the next 5 or 10 years. I can't wait to see and ride in an autonomous car, right? I think that will be a great evolution for transit. But at the same time, I don't know how that changes congestion one bit, right? If anything, it's going to add to the congestion. So I think you have a plan that obviously is going to take into account autonomous vehicles, that takes into account ride sharing, Uber, Lyft, etc. Because we always know that we're going to have a first mile, last mile issue with whatever the plan, whatever transit is designed. But I just don't see at the end of the day how autonomous cars changes the calculation on the congestion argument. We're on a collision with congestion. Autonomous cars is just going to make it worse.
Okay, so good. Let's then go now and give you each a chance to just kind of spell out why you think this is so important for the city and why it should be done now. And I'm sure both of you could make the argument that this should have been done at least a decade ago.
I think we're behind the 8 ball now, and so the time for us to do this is long past. But I just believe that with Nashville's continued growth, we're going to continue to attract individuals to our fair city, and most of those people will need to get around. How they get around is going to impact those of us who are already here. I live in Goodlettsville, moved to Goodlettsville in 1989, and my commute time has grown significantly from the time I moved out there. If there was a great transit option, don't you know, I'd take it in a heartbeat.
Me too.
But that's not been available, and I know that with this plan, I will have another option for moving in and out of the city. The other thing that I'll say is that lots of people are being moved, and with the growth in Nashville, people are being moved to the outer regions of the county, further out, and we need that option. I mean, sitting in traffic is not anybody's idea of fun, and I just believe that if we don't do this now, it's going to cost us so much more. We continue, the cost continues to grow every day. We don't do anything.
You're nodding your head. Yeah,
traffic.
I think she said it well.
Traffic was worse today than it was yesterday. It's going to be worse tomorrow than it is today. Since 2010, I mean, this is just math, right? I mean, since 2010, we've added 100,000 cars to our roads. Between now and 2040, if you look at the growth pattern, we're going to add 1 million more cars if we don't do something to address that. So this gets worse and worse by the day, by the week, by the month. We've put it off, and if we're ever going to do it, now is the time.
Okay, and I think if you're someone out there that just chooses to walk everywhere, then fine. But other than that, I can't imagine anyone that visits or lives in this area thinking that something doesn't need to be done about our transportation issues. I mean, something. Now, that's where, if you don't think something needs to be done, you're in a dream world. Well, no, you're flat wrong. Something needs to be done. Now, perhaps the details of what to be done is where we could quibble. And so the question is, some might say, all right, well, do we really need a tunnel? Or, you know, do we have to spend all that money on a tunnel? Can't we spend more money on dedicated bus lanes? You know, does it have to be light rail? Is there some other option that maybe is cheaper?
Well, let me address that.
Okay.
The way my view of this referendum is that this is first and foremost about dedicated funding for mass transit. Okay. Right? In this environment, funding for transit is always going to be subordinate to public safety, to education. Unless we come up with a dedicated funding stream, which is the foundation of this plan, there is never going to be enough to do whatever it is that we need to do, whether that's expand the bus service, whether that's bus rapid transit, whether that's light rail, whether that is a tunnel.
So are you saying then, and I guess I'm not sure I'm clear on it then, if the vote comes through, the vote is basically to approve the funding.
Absolutely.
Right. And so once that funding is done, does that mean then that some of these proposals that are already out there are not necessarily set in stone? Once you have that funding source in place, maybe there's a modification to the tunnel, or maybe there's something different that comes in terms of how much light rail there is?
Well, I think the statute, that the Improve Act that the legislature passed, requires us to have a plan that's approved. Okay. But at the same time, I think it'd be naive of us to think that that's not going to continue to evolve with technology over the next couple of months, over the next couple of years. The major work on this system isn't even scheduled till 2024, 2025. We're going to have plenty of time to continue to refine those plans, to continue to bring it back to the council, to continue to bring it back to the community. It'd be naive to think that that won't change over time.
So it sounds to me what really you're driving for now is convincing the populace to vote for what essentially would be about $5 more a month, which, again, money's money, and I understand. You're like, well, Nick, that's more than you think. Well, yeah, but for what you're getting for it. That's what you need to do, is get that in place and agree to that, and the consumer has to decide whether it's worth it and whether they want to go that way for then what comes later. correct?
Absolutely.
All right, let's just take a break on that now. We'll get into a lot more details. We have some phone calls coming in. The number is 737-7587. As I said, I want to remind you, we have 2 proponents of the plan on this morning. We are going to have critics of the plan coming on in a separate show. We're giving each a full program, just so you know. We're going to be fair here. We'll take a break, be back with your calls and more with our guests right after this.
Trying to